Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about a top scientist from the DRDO being arrested for sharing information with Pakistani operatives. We also talk about an interfaith wedding being cancelled in Uttarakhand. But first, we talk about Kiren Rijiju. Last week, Rijiju, who had been the law minister, was replaced by Arjun Ram Meghwal, the now former Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs and Minister of Culture. This replacement comes at a time when there is a deep standoff going on between the government and the judiciary, and after Kiren Rijiju's vocal pushback on behalf of the executive. In this segment, we are joined by Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath to talk about this development. Apurva, could you begin by talking about in what sense was Kiren Rijiju and his tenure different from previous law ministers?
So, since he was appointed the law minister in July 2021, Rijiju has been sort of the vocal face of this pushback against the judiciary by the Modi government. So, it's been Rijiju who's been making these statements, who's talking about judicial accountability, judicial appointments, which is all part of his job as law minister. But what defined Rijiju himself is perhaps the manner in which he made these statements. The brusque and sort of abrasive way he talked about the judiciary was what defined his tenure as law minister. I say this, Shashank, because judges and the judiciary are not used to be spoken to in that language. The previous law ministers were all lawyers who'd been part of that legal fraternity, so would have this decorum in addressing judges. So perhaps because Rijiju was an outsider to this legal fraternity, he has a law degree, but he's never practiced in courts, that when he came in, and which was partly why Rijiju was brought in to begin with, that he would have a fresh perspective on these things. So Rijiju's comments were often criticized, became topic of discussions even in courtrooms. You had pushback by members of the bar against some of his statements, even judges responding to him at times. So that sort of defined his 2-year tenure.
And could you give us some examples of this in terms of how he articulated the problems the government has with the judiciary?
So, it started with, in the parliament, Rijiju said judges have too many court vacations. The question was about pendency of cases. And while answering that question, he said judges have too many vacations, summer vacations are redundant and things like that.
So, sir, government will do everything. But when we talk about holiday being obtained by the judges, how much output a particular high court, a particular judge delivers, these are matter definitely which concerns every citizen of this country. Not only the honorable members of this house, but every citizen of this country deserves to know why so much pending of cases are there in our country. But at the same time...
Then he also went on to say that the court listens to small cases of involving bail and frivolous PILs. So why should the Supreme Court be hearing bail cases?
If Supreme Court of India starts hearing bail applications, if Supreme Court of India starts hearing all frivolous PILs, definitely it will cause lots of extra burden on the Honorable Court itself. Because Supreme Court...
We saw the next day that Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, responded and said, when matters of personal liberty are involved, no case is too small for the court.
Trust us to be guardians of the liberties of our citizens. And there is no case which is small enough or big enough for every court in the nation, be it the district judiciary, the High Court, or the Supreme Court. Because it is in us that the confidence of the citizens in the due process of law and the protection of liberty rests. And it is through the lives of the members of the bar who fearlessly espouse those causes that the flame of liberty burns bright even today.
So this sort of was the war of words with the judiciary that Rijiju started. And then on the issue of judicial appointments, for example, the Supreme Court initiated contempt action against the government because of delays in appointments. And as a response to that, Rijiju in an India Today conclave said that if the court thinks that the government is sitting on files, then don't send us the files. You run the show yourself. And just days later, a bench headed by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, who was hearing the contempt, responded and said, give us the power and we will do it. We have no issues. If the government is delaying, we will do it. So what happened was, instead of an official channel of communication between the Chief Justice of India, who heads the collegium, and the Law Minister, who represents the union government, all these conversations would take place in the media. The Law Minister would say something somewhere, and invariably there would be a response from the court. A consequence of this prolonged tug of war was, the Supreme Court for the first time made public the objections of the governments on certain candidates.
Right, and just for the benefit of our listeners, in the collegium system, the Supreme Court recommends the names of possible judges to the government, and the government can raise objections and send those names back. But those objections are almost never made public.
So, in the case of Saurabh Kirpal, Bombay High Court Advocate Somshekhar Sundaresan, and Madras High Court Advocate John Satyan, the collegium essentially made public what were the government's reservations on these three men. That somebody was critical of the Prime Minister, Kirpal, his sexuality being brought in. So, that sort of unprecedented stand the collegium took because of this confrontation. And perhaps the most jarring for the legal fraternity was when Rijiju, at yet another media conclave, labelled some retired judges as anti-India.
I have a fantastic working relationship with all the Chief Justices of the High Courts and other senior judges. There's no problem. It is a few of the retired judges, few, maybe 3 or 4. Few of those activists, part of that anti-India gang. These people are trying to make Indian judiciary play a role of opposition party. Some people even go to the court and say that, please rein in the government. Please change the policy of this government.
So this prompted a very strong response from the members of the bar. In fact, Justice K.V. Vishwanathan, who was sworn in as a judge of the Supreme Court just 2 days ago, wrote 2 scathing articles condemning the law minister for making such statements. The law minister's statements were preceded by a couple of events where retired judges of the Supreme Court and High Court spoke. There was Rohinton Nariman, who delivered a speech on PMLA and bail. There was Justice Madan Lokur, who in fact spoke about Rahul Gandhi's disqualification. So in that context, when Rijiju said that they're anti-India, there was a strong pushback from the bar.
Okay, now with Kiren Rijiju being replaced with Arjun Ram Meghwal, do we see this as a sign that the government is taking a step back and is attempting to soften its pushback?
So you can't miss the fact that the change in guard came just days after 2 setbacks for the BJP-ruled central government in the Supreme Court, right? The Delhi ruling that went completely against the centre, and also the Maharashtra ruling where, although the Supreme Court did not return power to Uddhav Thackeray government, it drew a lot of red lines for the office of the governor, the speaker, and essentially said that those political activities were unlawful or cast a shadow on them. So that is one context of why the government would prefer a softened stance when it comes to the judiciary, to work with the judiciary, especially going into an election year. And if you look at what happened a day after Meghwal took over the law ministry, in less than 48 hours, the government cleared 2 of the Supreme Court Collegium's recommendations for appointment of Supreme Court judges. It was K.V. Vishwanathan and Andhra Pradesh High Court Chief Justice Prashant Kumar Mishra, whose files were cleared on the second working day. And for context for our listeners, the last time the Supreme Court recommended some names, it took the law ministry 53 days. And before that, in December, when Justice Dipankar Datta was recommended by the collegium, it took the government 75 days to appoint him. So from 75 and 53, you've had appointment happen in less than 48 hours.
Okay, so it seems like there is an attempt by the government to soften its stand when it comes to the judiciary. But by doing this, is the government hoping that the courts will now take decisions in its favor?
Avoiding an all-out confrontation is always a good thing. Because of this confrontation, what we've seen happen is the delay in appointments affects the bar, affects the institution at large. A story that we have been reporting at the Indian Express is about Karnataka advocate Nagendra Nayak, who's waited almost 5 years for his elevation as a judge of the Karnataka High Court. Last month, he contested an election and lost the polls from Bhatkal on a JDS ticket. While his election issue became the center stage, what we must also know is that he waited for 5 years. That's the same thing with Delhi senior advocate Saurabh Kirpal. He's waited for almost 5 years. So this, in the larger context, affects the bar, the institution of the judiciary, and democracy at large if the court is not functioning at its optimum strength. The other aspect is, of course, a fair bit of tension between the executive and the judiciary is a good thing for democracy. That balance of powers continues and is sustained because of this lack of bonhomie between the two institutions. But of course, in an election year, to avoid any instability, the government looking to soften its stand in the judiciary is what is obvious here.
And next we talk about the DRDO, which is the Research and Development Wing of the Ministry of Defense. Earlier this month, Pradeep Kurulkar, a senior scientist of the DRDO, was arrested by the Maharashtra Anti-Terrorism Squad for allegedly sharing information with Pakistan-based operatives. There are now concerns that Kurulkar, who held several senior positions, may have shared crucial information with these operatives. In this segment, Indian Express's Sushant Kulkarni joins my colleague Rahel Philipose to talk about this case.
So, Sushant, could you begin by talking about the charges on which Pradeep Kurulkar has been arrested?
So, Kurulkar has been arrested under the provisions of the Official Secrets Act, which is an anti-espionage law. He has been charged under sections pertaining to spying by way of sharing sensitive information to an adversary state, and also wrongful communication to endanger the security and national interests of the country. So the investigation has revealed that he was in fact communicating with the Pakistan intelligence operatives from September and October last year. This primarily is a case of honey trap, in which the social media profile of a woman was used to lure him into communication and subsequently make him share sensitive information through messages, voice and video calls with this woman. So these are the charges leveled against him.
Right. And in the lead up to the arrest, do we know how he came under the scanner of the authorities?
So DRDO, being a strategically sensitive establishment involved in development of systems which are critical to the national security, it has a dedicated Directorate of Vigilance and Security. This wing takes up preventive and proactive measures to tackle cases of corruption and also the security breaches like this one. So it is learned that Kurulkar's communications came under the scanner of this wing, this Directorate of Vigilance and Security. And sometimes around February earlier this year, Kurulkar's laptop, cell phone, computer hard disks, other electronic devices were seized. Then a forensic examination of these devices was conducted, and an internal probe was done by a standing committee of the DRDO for security. This internal probe revealed that Kurulkar was in communication with the Pakistan-based intelligence operatives while he was the director of the Research and Development Establishment Engineers, which is a prime facility of the DRDO based in Pune. So the case was then referred to the Maharashtra Anti-Terrorism Squad for further investigation and prosecution of Kurulkar. Just to note, a few days prior to his arrest, Kurulkar was internally transferred from his position of the director of this facility and has now been placed under suspension since his arrest.
Okay, so you mentioned his role as the director of the facility, but could you talk about the kinds of projects that he was involved in?
So he has worked on several strategically significant projects like the anti-satellite missile under Mission Shakti, the nuclear-capable Agni series, and also the crucial ballistic missile defense interceptor. But the colleagues of his we have spoken to have said that arguably his biggest contribution has been the successful development of the surface-to-air missile named Akash, so which is a key asset of the Indian Army and Indian Air Force's air defense capabilities. So Kurulkar was the project director and team manager for the Akash ground systems. He has also been involved in development of a range of surface-to-air missiles, Nirbhay subsonic cruise missile, and Prahar short-range ballistic missile, among others. And not just this, around in the middle of 2000s, the DRDO had formed a think tank which was codenamed GFAST, the Group for Forecasting Systems and Technologies. This was to contemplate the future of defense research in India. And Kurulkar was one of the 10 to 12 selected individuals who were part of this pool, who were picked up from a pool of around 6,000 DRDO scientists at the time.
Right. You mentioned that you spoke to his colleagues at the DRDO. How have they reacted to his arrest? And what did they tell you about the kind of concerns that this raises?
So it has definitely come as a major shock to his colleagues within the DRDO and also to the people who know him, to whom we have spoken to. Some of the colleagues have said that days prior to his arrest, they had an inkling that something was happening about Kurulkar. And then there was a sudden internal transfer. But an arrest, and that too in an espionage case, has definitely come as a shock to them. What is really concerning to his colleagues is not just this arrest is concerning to his colleagues, not just because the projects that he has worked on, but also the positions that he has held within the DRDO. So Kurulkar is known among his peers as a taskmaster, someone who's good at resolving conflict, and someone who has been a good orator and loved to talk and tell stories. So, and some of his colleagues have also raised doubts about the prosecution's theory that he has shared classified information. A lot of information about the DRDO systems is publicly available on, for example, DRDO website or through other outlets. So whether the information he really shared was classified in nature or not is the doubt that many of his colleagues have expressed.
Right. And with a case like this that involves espionage and, someone who's the senior from a defense research organization, what do you think are the biggest unknowns about this case right now?
So one of the key things that is still unknown to us is what kind of information was shared by Kurulkar. During one of the hearings of the case that is currently going on, the Maharashtra AT has told the court that one Indian Air Force staffer, who is a non-commissioned officer, was also targeted by the Pakistan-based intelligence operatives in the same manner as that of Kurulkar, and through the same set of IP addresses and during the same time period. So officials have said that this Indian Air Force staffer has not been made an accused in the case, but the Air Force has initiated a separate inquiry and action against this person. So it will now be pertinent to know what kind of impact these security breaches have had at the operational level, if there was any impact of these cases, and whether any more people from the country's security apparatus have been targeted in this manner.
And in the end, we talk about an interfaith wedding that recently got cancelled in Uttarakhand. This wedding was of the daughter of Yashpal Benam, a local BJP leader.
Who's also the chairman of the Pawar Municipal Corporation, and he's also a former MLA.
That's Indian Express's Avaneesh Mishra, who reports on Uttarakhand for the paper.
He won in 2007 from the Pawar seat as an independent, and he's a well-known leader in his area because he's been active in the politics for a very long time now.
Now, according to what Yashpal told the media, around 2-3 months back, it was decided that his daughter, who is Hindu, will get married to one of her classmates from the Lucknow University, and who is from the Muslim community.
And then both the families sat together, they discussed this whole thing, and after the agreement of both the families, it was decided that the guy and the girl will get married on the May 28th. and they also started preparing for everything, because as it happens in Hindu marriages, the whole function is for 3-4 days. So this entire ceremony for the wedding, the Sangeet and everything was planned for from May 25 to 28.
But their plans came to an end shortly after the wedding card was printed and distributed.
According to Yashpal, when he decided that his daughter is going to get married to a Muslim man, he talked to people around him, his relatives and the locals and everything. And he claimed that initially they all agreed to what was happening. They were happy that this is the 21st century and their daughters and sons they are free to choose whoever they want to get married to. But according to him, a lot of people also suggested that because this might get controversial, so you should not publish a Shadi ka card. But he got it published and he sent it to his relatives and people he wanted to invite. But one of the card, someone posted it on the social media and the card went viral on the social media, after which a lot of locals and a lot of people from the right-wing organizations started to call him, started to message him and raise objection that you are from the BJP and why are you allowing your daughter to get married to a Muslim guy?
In fact, some people under the banner of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad even protested in the area, burnt effigies of Yashpal and raised slogans against him. Avaneesh says that initially Yashpal was optimistic about the wedding despite the backlash and had told reporters that he agreed to the marriage because he loves his daughter and it was her decision in the end.
But after, the news spread and he started getting calls and messages from, outside body also, then at some point things might have changed for him. We do not know what was the breaking point for him. But now he has kind of changed his decision and said that as a public representative, it is his responsibility to listen to what the people are feeling. And being a public representative, he does not want his daughter's marriage to take place under police protection. And that is why, as of now, he has cancelled all the functions planned as well as his daughter's marriage to a Muslim guy.
इस तरह का माहौल जो है क्रिएट हो गया है कि मुझे लगता है इस तरह के माहौल के बाद शादी के लिए परिस्थितियां अनुकूल नहीं है। जो हमारा 25, 26, 27, 28 का कार्यक्रम था, तो फिलहाल इन तमाम चीज़ों को देखते हुए एक बाप होने के नाते मैंने अपनी बच्ची के प्यार को स्वीकारा। वर पक्ष के हम लोगों ने, परिवार ने आपस में बैठकर शादी करने को फैसला किया था। लेकिन जो वर्तमान माहौल चल रहा है वो एक नगर पालिका अध्यक्ष होने के नाते, एक जनप्रतिनिधि होने के नाते अब मेरी जिम्मेदारी अपनी जनता के प्रति भी है कि कभी धन्यवाद करता हूँ।
In the meantime, the BJP has refused to comment on this matter, saying that it is someone's personal issue and that they do not like to interfere in people's personal lives.
But I was talking to the state media in charge for BJP, Manveer Chauhan, and while saying that this is someone's personal matter and that is why he is not going to comment, he also added that BJP is also a party which believes that if somewhere someone is trying to, convert someone forcefully or trying to push them into terrorism, BJP is against that. I mean, he did not say that this statement is directly connected to the current issue, but we can make whatever we want from that.
Avaneesh says that for years, Uttarakhand has been a peaceful state, both in terms of crime and politics. But just like in other parts of the country, things are changing there as well.
And I mean, this is my own personal belief, but I think that if the same thing was happening around 2-3 years ago, this would not have been the reaction. Because this current incident, this is also kind of people are trying to connect with the Kerala story and, the concept of love jihad and the laws which have been made in some of the states. So that is why it has gained a lot of controversy. And as I was talking to some of the Congress leaders, I was talking to the Congress state president Karan Mahara, and he mentioned that even in BJP, there are a lot of people where either they themselves have married to someone from the other religion or someone from their family have married to someone from a different community. He gave the example of Shanwaz Hussain, he gave the example of Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, he gave the example of Bageshwar Dham, whose sister got married to a Muslim guy. And there are so many examples within the BJP itself. If you ask my personal opinion, this is something which we need to think about because this is very problematic. And at a time when we are making laws against love jihad and all those things, we also need to make sure that those marriages which are lawful, they also should be kind of given immunity, and the rights of the people should also be protected against under the act.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar and produced by Rahel Philipose and me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.